Mick Myers spent 30 long years living on the streets, invisible to most who passed him by. His life was a tapestry woven with loneliness and despair, each thread marked by years of hardship and isolation. With his only comfort being the melodies he strummed on his guitar, Mick roamed the streets of San Leandro, California, hoping for a few kind glances or spare change. But hope was fleeting, and Mick had long resigned himself to the thought that his life would never improve. In his tattered clothing and with a downcast gaze, Mick blended into the background of the bustling city. People walked past him as if he didn't exist, assuming he was just another man who had lost his way due to poor decisions. They didn't see the kind, gentle man underneath, the one who had lived through unimaginable pain and loss. Mick's story wasn't one of addiction or criminal behavior. Instead, it was a tragic tale of circumstances, missed opportunities, and a longing for connection. Mick was born as Gordon Michael Oakley, but he wouldn't learn that name until decades later. As a baby, he was adopted by a family in San Leandro. His adoptive mother was warm and loving, doing everything she could to make Mick feel like a valued member of their family. But, despite her efforts, Mick never felt entirely at home. His adoptive siblings ignored him, and he grew up feeling like an outsider. He was a quiet, reserved child, retreating into his own world to escape the constant feeling of exclusion. When Mick turned 16, his life took a devastating turn. It was then that he learned he was adopted. The revelation shattered his already fragile sense of belonging. He felt even more disconnected from the family that had raised him, and a deep sense of loneliness began to take root in his heart. A loneliness that would follow him for the rest of his life. As Mick grew older, the bonds with his adoptive family only weakened. When his adoptive parents passed away, his siblings severed all ties with him. Mick was left completely alone, with no support system to lean on. He drifted through life, taking on odd jobs and trying to find his place in a world that seemed to have no room for him. He eventually found work as a truck driver, a solitary job that mirrored his isolated existence. But even that small piece of stability was short-lived. When he lost his job, Mick's life began to unravel. With no income and no one to turn to, he found himself homeless. For 3 decades, Mick survived on the streets. He relied on his guitar to earn a few coins, playing for anyone who would stop to listen. He slept in doorways and alleys, his body worn down by the relentless challenges of street life. Each day was a battle to find food and shelter, and each night brought the fear of what dangers might come. Mick's life seemed destined to end in the same despair in which it had unfolded. That was until a chance encounter with a compassionate law enforcement officer changed everything. Alameda County Deputy Sheriff Jacob Swalwell first noticed Mick during his regular patrols. Mick wasn't causing trouble, he was simply trying to survive. Yet his constant presence in the same spots caught the sheriff's attention. Swalwell initially gave Mick warnings not to loiter or beg, but those warnings didn't deter Mick. Desperation drove him back to the same places, hoping for a small break in his endless struggle. One day, frustrated by Mick's persistence, Sheriff Swalwell decided to take more serious action. He approached Mick and asked for identification. Mick's response was simple but heartbreaking. He didn't have any. Curious, the sheriff asked why. What followed was a story that would change not only Mick's life, but also the sheriff's perspective forever. Mick explained that he had been homeless for 30 years, with no family and no ID. He had no access to Social Security benefits or any form of assistance because he couldn't prove his identity. He wasn't an addict or an alcoholic, and he didn't smoke. He was just a man who had been dealt a terrible hand in life. Sheriff Swalwell listened intently, and for the first time in years, Mick felt truly seen. The sheriff's initial frustration turned into compassion. He decided to help Mick reclaim his identity, a task that would prove to be anything but easy. Mick's situation was a bureaucratic nightmare. Without a driver's license, the DMV required a birth certificate and proof of residence, neither of which Mick had. The process was daunting, but Sheriff Swalwell refused to give up. With the help of a local pastor, they began piecing together the documents Mick needed. Sheriff Swalwell took it upon himself to track down Mick's birth certificate, a journey that led to an incredible discovery. Mick learned his birth name, Gordon Michael Oakley, and began to uncover pieces of the life he had lost. Mick's story gained attention, catching the eye of Miracle Messages, a nonprofit organization dedicated to reconnecting homeless individuals with their families. Private investigator Mark Askins took up Mick's case, determined to find out more about his past. Through relentless research, Askins uncovered the names of Mick's biological parents, Wiley Albert Oakley and Mary Pauline Oakley. The investigator learned that Mick's mother, now known as Polly, was still alive and living in California. For over 60 years, Polly had wondered what had happened to the baby boy she had given up for adoption. When Askins told her that her son was alive and wanted to meet her, Polly was overcome with emotion. Mick and Polly's first phone call was a moment neither would ever forget. "My son," Polly repeated through tears, her voice trembling with joy and disbelief. For Mick, hearing his mother's voice for the first time was both overwhelming and healing. They spoke for hours, sharing stories and beginning the process of reconnecting. 2 weeks later, with the help of volunteers who funded his travel, Mick boarded a plane for the first time in his life. Accompanied by Sheriff Swalwell and Detective Askins, Mick traveled to Humboldt County to meet Polly in person. The reunion was everything they had hoped for. As soon as Mick stepped through Polly's door, she embraced him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I've waited so long for this moment," she said, her voice filled with love. But the surprises didn't end there. Mick discovered he had an entire family waiting for him, siblings, nieces, nephews, and even great-grandchildren. After decades of isolation, Mick was finally surrounded by people who cared for him. It was a moment of redemption and renewal, a chance to start over. Mick's life began to change in ways he never thought possible. With his identity restored, he was able to apply for Social Security benefits and start planning for the future. He is now working toward moving closer to his family in Humboldt County, where he can build a life filled with love and connection. The story of Mick Myers is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the profound impact of compassion. Sheriff Swalwell's decision to help Mick wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a turning point that gave Mick a second chance at life. Mick's journey from homelessness to hope is a testament to the idea that no one is beyond saving, and that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of a brighter tomorrow.